Well, in this season of warmth and growth and sunshine and welcome rain, we have a story that fits the tone of the summer. It's uplifting, it's positive, and what is it? And easy to grasp. There we go. This is a story that is incredibly simple, really. There are only three main characters. The one who is healed, the woman who is healed, Jesus the healer, and the critic. Isn't there a critic in every crowd? But first, let's focus on the woman who is healed. The Bible tells us, Luke tells us, that she has been bent over for 18 long years. 18 years. And yet, she's there in worship at the synagogue. She has come to praise God, to listen to what the stories tell her. She's in the crowd. Back then, probably the women would have been over here and the men had a slightly better spot in the synagogue. But Jesus spots her, even though she isn't calling attention to herself. And Jesus calls her over. And without hesitation, without being asked, there's no test, Jesus heals her. He lifts off her burden. She stands up straight and praises God. It's an amazingly transformational moment for this woman. She is recognized as worthy. She is acknowledged as valuable. In a man's world, Jesus has noticed her, and he has healed her. He has given her a name. He has called her daughter of Abraham. That means child of God. For us, that means beloved. She has been bent over for so long. I want us to try something. Let's all bow our heads. But not in prayer. Let's keep our eyes open. And yet, our heads are bowed. Let's be aware of what we can see. And let's be aware of what we can't see. We can't see the smiles of people as they come towards us. We can't make eye-to-eye contact. We can't see the bird's flight or the blue sky above. And can we be heard? Our voices go downwards. You ask Bev how she feels about the choir with hymn books right in front of them. She'll tell you, to be heard, you have to have your head up. Now, if you haven't all fallen asleep by now, you can lift your heads. So that is what it feels to physically be bent over. There's a story in a 1958 American novel called The Ugly American, which was a huge book in the States, completely transformed their foreign policy. But one of the good stories in the book is about Homer and Emma. Emma is Homer's wife. And Emma notices that all the older people in the village where they are staying are bent over. And so she watches carefully and observes and sees that after the monsoon rains, the older people are the ones that clear up the debris. And they use brooms with really short handles because wood is in short supply and very expensive. So the brooms are all short like this. And the people spend hours and hours every day cleaning up the debris from the the vicious monsoons that have swept over their village. And so Emma gives this some thought. And she goes out and she finds a plant, a tall reed, and she cultivates it. She grows a number of these tall reeds. And then one day when the villagers are visiting, some of the villagers are visiting her place, she goes out and she cuts one of those reeds and she binds palm fronds around them and she proceeds to sweep, standing straight. She has unburdened them suddenly. They say, "Where can we find these reeds?" And she tells them where to find them. And 4 years later, when she and her husband are back in Pittsburgh, she gets a letter from the head man of the village who says, "Thank you. Thank you for this blessing, because all of our people now walk straight and tall." What a blessing. But it isn't just physical things that bend us over, is it? So many things in life can bend us over, can tackle our spirits and lock them up. The fear of debt, family crisis, pain, difficult diagnoses. So many things that come together in our lives to make us feel like we are bent over and that we cannot stand up. Charlie Chaplin had a wonderful saying. He said, "You'll never find a rainbow if you're looking down." It's a good one to remember. But let's get back to the story. Jesus is in the synagogue that day. Jesus has been teaching. He's obviously recognized as a learned scholar of the Torah, and he is invited into the synagogue to teach. And Jesus has declared his mission. He has already told the people why he's there. Back in the 4th chapter of Luke, he quotes from Isaiah when he's first in the synagogue in Nazareth, and he tells them, "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because he has anointed me to bring good news to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim release to the captives and recovery of sight to the blind, to let the oppressed go free, and to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor." That's what Jesus is doing. He is doing that every day. So Jesus comes to the synagogue that Sunday to do what Jesus does. This good news doesn't wait until Monday. Releasing captives doesn't wait for Monday. New sight doesn't wait for Monday. The gift of freedom doesn't wait for Monday. Jesus is with the people then and now in every moment of their living. That's something that is so basic to our faith. And when I was thinking about this, I just had to go back to Susan's sermon 2 weeks ago, because what Jesus is doing is inviting us, is telling us to fear not. Fear not. Because Jesus assures us that he is with us in every moment of our living. And with the Holy Spirit, we are inspired to follow Jesus where he leads us, trusting in him, and filled with the hope of Jesus' promise to us. Thank you, Susan. I say this every day to myself now. So Jesus has invited us to follow, and we do. We are also in the business of lifting up. We lift up every time we turn to someone next to us and smile. We lift people up when we stop to chat. We lift people up when we stop to take a moment of private, quiet prayer, prayer for someone we know or people far away, we lift them up. We lift them up in many ministries at Grace, all the things we do. But what is so key to what we do is that the foundation is our relationship with Jesus, our continual transformation inside as we get to know God better. This is a relationship that is key to what we do. But it's a relationship that the leader of the synagogue was not interested in pursuing. He had no interest in finding out very much about Jesus. He had a job to do. He was trained to do this job, to keep the rules. He tackled Jesus. He said, "You can't do that. This is Sunday, Sabbath. This is a Sabbath, and you do not work on the Sabbath." The real question here is healing work? But the leader of the synagogue is having no discussion about this. He has been taught that this is the way it is, and you know what? Rules are rules. It's the way it is, right? They told you this, and that's how it is. Nothing ever changes in our lives, does it? You're all sitting out there in your suits and ties and your hats and your gloves, right? I could go anywhere with this. We could talk about democracy. We could talk about universal health care. We can talk about all the things that evolve and change. And most importantly, your relationship with Jesus and with God that changes and evolves every day. I think if you ask one of those children what their relationship with Jesus is, it would probably be a little different than yours because you have evolved. Don't stop. Don't stop today. Keep evolving. Keep looking for the path, for the knowledge, for the understanding, for the relationship, the give and take, the back and forth, the talking and the listening. So important. Yes, rules are rules, but the best ones are the ones that change. Interestingly, the rule about the Sabbath first comes up in when the laws are set down and the Sabbath is created, as I'm sure you all know, because in Genesis the story is that the earth was created by God in 6 days, and on the seventh he rested. And so the Sabbath is a time for the people to honor and remember God, and actually in their context in particular to remember the release from captivity from Egypt. And then in Isaiah, there's more talk about what the Sabbath means and how important it is to honor God on the Sabbath by focusing on God, letting other things go, not focusing on yourself, but focusing on God and the relationship between God and ourselves. But then by Jesus' time, rules, regulations, traditions had all gotten woven into the web. And in fact, Orthodox Jewish people still have these rules to follow. And in recent years, the scholars have had to look for loopholes, very, very tiny loopholes in all this structure, so that Orthodox Jews in Israel can turn on a radio in case there's an alert sounded about a danger that's coming. And as for putting on a gas mask, you can't imagine what they've gone through to figure out how to do that in the context of the Sabbath. But we have changed. We've moved on, haven't we? We're not blinkered by tradition or looking with tunnel vision because of the way we were brought up or the conventions of our day, are we? Jesus came to that synagogue that day to make sure that people understood that Jesus meant change. Times they were changing. Now, God's love was being made available to all. Forgiveness was for all. The meek, the oppressed, the women, the lame, the sick, were all beloved of God. That's what this story tells us today. Jesus came to bring Sabbath joy, Sabbath peace, Sabbath freedom, Sabbath compassion, every day, no limits. God's love doesn't have limits. It isn't crushed into packages. It's out there for everyone. Well, it is summer, and we need to be light and uplifted. And so I'll end with a little story. I forgot to make sure I was right on this with my husband, who does play golf, but I'm told there's such a thing as a mulligan in golf. And I imagine some of you play golf, and afterwards you can correct me so that I don't get it wrong in the second service. But my understanding of a mulligan is that if you happen to hit the ball into the water, or whack it into a bunch of bushes, or if it simply disappears off into the sky, someone that you're playing with can grant you a mulligan. Unasked for, unearned, unexpected, you're forgiven. You can play on. You aren't thrown out of the game. Your score isn't destroyed. You are granted a mulligan. Well, we as Christians are always granted mulligans. We are mulliganeers. Every time we turn around, every time we get it wrong, every time we mess up, we're granted a mulligan. That's God's way. And we have the opportunity to pass on a mulligan to everyone we meet, today, tomorrow. Here, have a mulligan, a second chance. We all get second chances. So today, let's stand straight. Let's look up at the rainbows. Let's see where Jesus is leading us. Let's be thankful for the wonderful story that Luke tells that shows us that we are all beloved.